All right, it looks like we're at the top of the hour. We'll go ahead and get started. We're glad that you could join us here today for this webinar on information archiving for finance. One thing before we get started that I wanted to make mention, if you do have any questions, feel free to put those through in the question panel there in the GoToWebinar, and we'll be sure to address those at the end here. Also, I'd like to thank everybody who stopped by our booth at NSCP. It was a great event for us. We met a lot of you there and hope you benefited from the information that we provided about archiving email, social media, and mobile. Hope you also were able to get a copy of the book, Information Archiving for Dummies. If anyone on this call was not at NSCP or did not get a copy of that book, please feel free to put that in the chat or the questions, and we'll make sure to get a copy of that out to you, at least an electronic copy of it for you. So once again, welcome everyone to this webinar. We're glad you could be here. My name is Q Mangus. I'm the product marketing manager here for a number of solutions at Micro Focus. Our archiving solution, Retain, is one of them. I want to start off this call by talking a little bit about information archiving and how it's evolved. In the past, archiving has typically been associated with email archiving when it comes to electronic archiving. And that's really evolved, right? So the past way of thinking was that an archive solution was something that you'd get to kind of check a box and say, okay, I'm compliant. And you take that box, that server, stick it in the corner, you never worry about it anymore. And you just do that for your email. You'd have that email in case something ever happened. You could be like, oh, I have it, here it is. But that's really changed. There's been a lot of regulations that have been enacted that have really changed the way that that's viewed, and it's also been evolved because of the demands of organizations on what they want from their archive. So the first change is that it's evolved from just email archiving to where now it's a store of all electronic communication. That includes mobile communication, instant messaging, social media. So that's the first shift that we saw. And the second shift is that archiving is now something that is more of a living, breathing thing, meaning it's not just this server that you stick in the corner and you forget about it. It's something where it's an active data store where you need to be able to readily access that, get to that information easily, and have tools to be able to search it, to browse it, to be able to perform eDiscovery, and to be able to gain insights into what's going on in your organization through what kind of data is stored there in the archive. So that's what information archiving is today. We like to call it archiving 2.0 or next generation information archiving. And it's that idea of archiving all of your electronic communication, giving you oversight, allowing you to manage your data, and giving you tools to be able to easily and quickly access that data. So let's touch for a minute a little bit about, to build on what we were talking about the regulations that you as a financial services organization has to deal with. I'm pretty sure we're all aware of these, but if you're not, this is just a quick review. Some of those being FINRA, the SEC rules, Sarbanes-Oxley, the Dodd-Frank. There's a number of regulations, and here just you can digest this slide. Basically, the overview is that there are a lot of regulations, and these regulations require that you have oversight on your communication data. You need to be able to archive data, whether that's in email or in social media or mobile communication data, and you need to be able to quickly and easily get to that data in case of an audit or in case of litigation or just in case of allegations. And you also need to archive it to be able to manage your data. So those are kind of the drivers for archiving, is that you need to be able to comply with regulations, you need to be able to manage your data, you need to be able to quickly and easily get to that data. I like to show this slide. This was from an Osterman research study that was done a few years ago, just about the kind of or what organizations are archiving today. Most organizations have some sort of email archive. Whether that's a good solution or not, they do have that checkbox and they have a solution. A number of organizations, not very many, are archiving instant messaging, but text messages and social media is lagging far behind, and that's something that really needs to be archived. So there is a disparity between what is required, as we saw in the regulations, and what people are actually doing. I'm going to touch on a couple of things that when we're talking about how it's evolved. So we know that mobile devices are pervasive, right? You probably have employees that are bringing their own device or that are demanding that you provide them a device. And so this can be viewed as a good or a bad thing, but we know that mobile devices are here and they're here to stay. And that the communication that is done, if it's done for business, needs to be viewed the same as email or social media, that it needs to be archived, that you need to have oversight. And the big important part about mobile communication is that you need to have a policy. This policy needs to dictate what is and is not appropriate for mobile communication. And that policy needs to dictate that you will have oversight, that you will be archiving mobile communication data. So that's something to think about, is that you need to be able to address mobile devices, what's being communicated, and how you can do that. One thing too is if you're dealing with people bringing their own device, a good solution is dual persona, which means that there's an app or some partition on the phone that keeps business data business and that personal data is personal. And I'll touch on a solution that we have for that, but that's something that you really need to keep in mind when it comes to BYOD. A couple other things that I want to touch on here is social media archiving. This is very important for if your employees are using their social media accounts to communicate with your customers. And of course, you have corporate social media accounts. Both of those scenarios, that information needs to be archived for oversight. Another thing that you need is you need to be able to have alerts for keywords, questions, and personal identifiable info. This is really important because you need to be able to interact well on your social accounts, but you need to be able to also have that oversight. Once again, it's important to have a policy that dictates what should and should not be said on social media and how it should be used, and then you need to be able to enforce that policy through archiving. A few things too, once again, to just touch on some drivers for archiving and why you should be doing it. Gartner recently came out and said that 75% of global companies will be involved in litigation or some sort of audit, like regulatory action, that requires you to have eDiscovery before the end of the year. So if you haven't been involved in eDiscovery or litigation, consider yourself lucky. Keep your fingers crossed that you don't have that in the future, but know that there's a good chance that you will be involved in that and that you'll need to be able to produce your information. And hopefully you have a solution to do that. And if you don't, we'll talk about one that we offer. Also, the Enterprise Strategy Group found that about 46% of organizations have actually had an eDiscovery request in the past 12 months. So you can see that a lot of organizations have had one recently, or they're going to have one, according to the Enterprise Strategy Group and Gartner. One other thing, too, that's really interesting is that your data store is growing every day. And that data is becoming outdated. It's becoming trivial. But the rate of growth is about 40 to 60% each year. So you need to be able to manage that data. How are you doing that? And then building on what I was saying before, Gartner has said that about 15 to 60% of data is trivial, redundant, outdated, risky. That's about what you have in your data stores now are redundant, outdated, and trivial, about 15 to 60% depending on your organization. So you need to be able to manage that data. You need to be able to have a solution that allows you to keep what you need to keep and delete what you shouldn't have. Get rid of that, purge that from your system. And that will help you with compliance. It'll help you manage your data and be prepared for legal discovery. So let's touch on the solution that we offer with Retain Unified Archiving. Before I go into that, let me just see if there's any questions that you have. Like I said, feel free to put those through in the questions panel. If you have any questions about what's been said so far, please put those through. If not, I'll jump into the solution that we're going to be talking about. So I don't see any questions right now. If you do have any, feel free to put those through. So let's jump into the solution, Retain Unified Archiving. So on its at a high level, what Retain does is it archives all of your email, multi-platform email, mobile communications, social media, and instant messaging. We allow you to have access to the archive, whether that's through the web interface, a plugin that goes into your email system like Outlook, the mobile app. We have an application that allows you to access the archive on your mobile device, or the offline viewer. Also with Retain, we have feature intelligent archiving where we tie directly to the email system, like Exchange or Office 365 would use journaling or the Microsoft Recoverable Items folder to be able to archive all messages and make sure nothing gets deleted before it's archived. And the same goes for GroupWise. For Gmail, we can archive that way. And then one great part about Retain is the built-in eDiscovery. We have tools to be able to perform eDiscovery of the Retain archive that are built in, that are included when you purchase Retain. So you don't have to have a separate solution to be able to perform eDiscovery of your archive. It's all included. Now let's touch on each individual portion. So I like to show that circle because it shows overall what Retain can do, how it archives all of those different types of communication into that central archive. Let's touch on each piece individually. So with email archiving, Retain can archive multi-platform and mixed messaging environments. So if you're running Exchange and Office 365, or you're running Gmail and Exchange, or you're running GroupWise and Gmail, you have the ability to have mixed environment archiving. So you can archive one platform and another, multiple platforms simultaneously. This also makes it great for you to be able to migrate. So if let's say you're running Exchange today and you want to move to Gmail tomorrow, we would be able to tie to Exchange and archive all your email, and then you can move to Gmail and tie that to Retain, and it will be archiving Gmail. And then you'll have your legacy email system archived and your current email system archived in that same central archive. Also, with Retain, you can browse email within the archive. You can allow your end users to access that archive and browse email directly from there. The folder structure is replicated so it looks familiar to an end user. And then, of course, the administrator or other named users can access the entire archive and perform search and eDiscovery of that entire archive. And as I stated before, there is an email plugin that allows you to access the archive directly from your email client. So once again, the supported platforms are Exchange, Office 365, and then Skype is for business is supported because that's routed through Exchange and Office 365. GroupWise, Gmail, Bloomberg Professional, and IBM Notes are all the email systems that we support. Here's an example of what I was talking about, how the folder structure is replicated. So all messages are archived, all the folders are archived, and the messages within those folders. So when a user goes into the web UI, they'll be able to it looks familiar to them and they can browse that and see their messages. There's different rights that you can grant users so they can access the archive, their personal archive. You can allow them to restore their own personal messages directly back to the live inbox, reducing the demand on IT to be able to find and restore that one lost email. We give you that ability. And then moving along, here's an example of the email plugin. This is one for Outlook. You can actually access the archive directly from the plugin, and you can also cache that. So messages can be cached for offline use. You can just specify the amount of time that you want those cached, and they'll be cached directly in Outlook for offline access. So moving right along, let's talk a little bit about mobile archiving. So on its surface, Retain archives BlackBerry, Android, iOS. Archives the text messages, phone call logs, BBM and BBM protected, and PIN messages. For each device, it works a little differently. For BlackBerry, it ties directly to the BlackBerry Enterprise Service and pulls the messages down from there. For Android, there's an app that goes on the device that's going to pull all the text messages and the phone call logs directly from that device. And then for iOS, we actually have partnered with a company called CellTrust, where CellTrust will place an app on the phone, and that app assigns a separate mobile business number to the phone where a CellTrust user, can call and text using that app, and it's completely separate from the native dialer or text message, so like iMessage or text message using the native application. And so what that does is it allows for personal communication to be personal, done via the native application, and then business data is done through the CellTrust app. And then we tie directly with the CellTrust app to be able to archive that information as well. The other great thing is that the data that is sent via CellTrust, if it's from one CellTrust user to another, that's all encrypted across the line. If it's done outside of the network, it's encrypted up until it hits the mobile carrier. And then with the latest release of Retain that's coming out at the end of this month, so in the next few days, we actually have partnered with mobile carriers to be able to archive text messages, so MMS and SMS, directly from the mobile carrier. And that applies to iOS, Android, BlackBerry, or any other device that's tied to that mobile carrier. So we integrate directly with the mobile carrier to be able to pull those text messages down and archive them. This is especially important for those organizations that have, a choose your own device or a corporate issued device policy. And this is really important for finance because we know a lot of organizations do it that way. We give you the ability to have a seamless experience through the mobile carrier to be able to archive those messages without users having to do anything or having to place anything on the phone. It's all done through the carrier. We're really excited about this, and we know that gives you just one other way to have that oversight on communication. Now, for social media, what we do is we would tie to Pinterest, Instagram, LinkedIn, Google+, Twitter, Facebook, Flickr, Vimeo, and YouTube, and we'd actually tie directly to those social media platforms, and we'd capture full resolution pictures, videos, GIFs, and other data formats, and we'd pull those directly into Retain, and then it'd be placed in the same central archive with email and mobile. We give you the ability to monitor your social media for keywords, questions, and personal identifiable info. You'll get an alert if there's a keyword that you've specified, if there's questions, so that you'll be notified and you can know that those are out there and that you can respond to them. Also, you can connect to social media accounts without having to having the login info. You just have to have somebody logged into that account, and it's going to archive whether that's on or off the network. There's also a sentiment rating, so you can see how people are interacting with your social media. Whether that's positive or negative, you'll be able to see the sentiment of what your social media postings are doing. And all that information is archived in that central archive. Now, being able to access your archive is essential. That's what differentiates those legacy solutions from a archiving 2.0 solution like Retain, is that you can quickly and easily get to your data. And so here's an example of that search. As you start to type in, once you get to 3 letters, it's going to auto-suggest items that are in the archive. And it's going to highlight those terms within the archive. So you can quickly and easily get to that data. And as we talk about that Retain Unified Archive, Retain gives you the ability to search all archive data from one central location. And you can grant rights to auditors, legal, HR, whomever else that you think needs access to that entire archive. You can grant rights to them to be able to do that. And then the search is powerful, so you can specify what items you're looking for, where it's at, whether that's the subject, sender, recipient. You can specify a date range. You can specify which users. We make it easy for you to get to that data. And then there's tools that are built in to be able to let's go back one, to be able to forward or export or restore messages, to place litigation holds, to be able to print them, and to be able to export them as well. And then here's an example of search terms so the search results are all there. I specified directly those I wanted to see: multimedia messages, chats, status updates, and searches. And I was able to see that right from that central archive, and I was able to see everything from one central archive, whether that be a Facebook message, a text message, or even a YouTube video. Here's an example of the archive app. Make it easy to get to your archive data, and you can deploy that app on Android or iOS, and it tied directly to the archive. You'd be able to access it directly from the mobile device. Another thing that I talked about was that offline or standalone viewer. What's great with this solution is that you can do a search, you can export to this archive viewer that's a fully standalone viewer. It's fully indexed so that you can hand this off, put it on a DVD, a jump drive, or Dropbox, hand it off to an outside team, like a legal team that may not need access to the entire archive. They can access that subset. Then you can redact or strike out items from there and then further export it if needs be to the PDF, giving you once again another ability to access that archive. So kind of in summary, here are the 8 key features of Retain: that multi-platform mixed environment archiving, being able to access it on-prem or in the cloud. You have that options for deployment. The 3 cloud options are private cloud, public cloud, or a partner cloud that we have, allowing you to have options when it comes to how Retain is hosted for you. Those flexible archive access with the web interface, the email plugin, the mobile app, or the offline viewer. The intelligent archiving that I talked about. Those built-in eDiscovery tools to be able to search, browse. Also, being able to have tagging where you can actually tag messages as confidential. You can tag them as they're archived or after they're archived. And then we give you the ability to migrate email systems efficiently, like I talked about. So those are those key features. Touching really quickly on eDiscovery to kind of summarize what we just talked about. You have the ability to perform those searches. You have compliance. There's a full audit trail so you can actually see everyone who's accessed the archive and what they've done, any searches they've done, any changes they've made. You can perform redaction. Those are all built into Retain. You can place those litigation holds. You can grant permissions, and you can quickly and easily access that archive. So to finish up, here's your next steps. You can see how this solution will work for you. You can get a price quote. We know that this solution can benefit you. It is that next generation archiving solution. If you don't have an archive, we encourage you to check us out. If you have a legacy solution, we encourage you to see how Retain can help you. And we would love to win your business. Feel free to reach out to us or visit us at retainarchiving.com. We can show you next steps and get you a price quote to see how affordable Retain can be and how it can help you manage that data and ensure compliance. Thanks everyone for your time and participation in this webinar. We do have some time for questions. Feel free to put those through. I did see a few come through. We'll go ahead and hit on those. So the first question that came through is, how do you deal with multiple mobile devices? Let's say a user is using multiple devices. How would you archive that? So what we do is we actually archive per user. So what we would do is we would actually be able to create a profile where that user has multiple mobile devices, and then we'd be able to tie that back to that user. So if they're texting, say through an iPhone and also an Android, we'd be able to pull those messages in and tie that back to that user. And price-wise, when it comes to the mobile archiving, it is price per device, not per user. So it's based on the number of devices that you are archiving. Which leads me to the next question, which is how is Retain priced? So it's different depending on the type of messages that you're archiving. So for example, there's a base price for Retain, and that gives you the Retain system. And then it's priced per user when it comes to email archiving. So it's all based on the number of email boxes you're archiving. and that's per user. And then for mobile devices, as I stated, it's based on per device. And then for social media, it's based on number of records. And there's tiers, so it's like 1,000 records per month, then 5,000, then 10,000. So you can price that. So depending on the number of records you need archived on social media, it's not per user, it's per number of records. So it doesn't matter how many accounts you have or how many types of social media you're archiving. It's all based on the number of records. And it all depends, and it varies depending on your organization type, size, and industry. So once again, if you're interested in pricing, feel free to reach out to us. We can get you pricing based on your organization. Okay, that looks like all the questions we have for now. Thanks again for your interest. Let's see and make sure there's nothing else price wise. Okay. Or excuse me, question wise. We had the one on pricing. That's why I said that there. Um, well, thanks again, everybody, for your interest in this webinar. Just as a reminder, this webinar has been recorded, so you should be getting an email shortly, probably tomorrow or on Monday, with the link to the recording. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, and I'll answer those for you. But look for that email with the recording. And thanks again for being here and for your time. And I hope you have the rest of a good day. Thanks again.